Welcome to Lingua Latina Tutorials with Mr. K, Pensvm D. This video explains the new grammar and syntax found in Chapter 21 of the Lingua Latina per se Illustrata series. It is meant to accompany the Latine Disco text available from Focus Bookstore and the Pensvm D worksheets available from 50%latin.blogspot.com or christianlanguage.com. Let's look at our first example in the text. So if you'll go with me to line 7. We see here, starting at line 6, Vestis humida est, quod Marcus per imbrem ambulavit. His clothing is wet because Marcus walked through the rain. Ambulavit is a new tense. So you've met in the previous chapters the present tense, the imperfect tense, the future tense, and now you're going to be introduced to the perfect tense. In Latin we have 6 tenses, and 3 of them are in the past. You met one of them in the past, the imperfect, which is, I told you before, like a home movie in the past. It shows you things that have happened continuously in the past, whereas the tense you're learning today, the perfect, it is recording an event more like a snapshot in history, something that has been completed. So the person, number, tense, mood, and voice of ambulavit would be third person singular. It's Marcus himself. Perfect active indicative. Perfect is translated with either an ed or a has or have helping verb. He has walked, he walked, they have walked, ambulaverunt. So the endings of the perfect are isti it, imus istis erunt, and they are added to the perfect stem. And we're going to talk more about the perfect stem as we move on, but we see here for ambulare, the verb meaning to walk, that there's a V that's been inserted here. You'll see for each of the conjugations there is a pattern of how you form this perfect stem, but there's going to be usually a new consonant or vowel inserted here before the endings, and you'll see how it changes for each conjugation. So notice the ending it. So isti it, imus istis erunt, added to the perfect stem. The present stem of ambulare is just ambula. The perfect stem is ambula with a V on the end. Okay, the next feature that I want to point out is in line 11, and continuing his pattern of giving you the active and passive forms of each tense. We have the passive of the perfect. The active here, ambulavit, he walked, and here we're going to have a passive from pulsara. So, sed cur sanguis de naso fluit Marco. Sanguis et de naso fluit quod Marcus a sexto pulsatus est. So, why is blood flowing from Marcus's nose? Blood is flowing from his nose because Marcus was hit or was punched by Sextus. So, this is the third person singular perfect passive indicative. He was punched. It's a single event in the past. It's not ongoing action in the past. And notice how this is formed from 2 parts. What you have here, pulsatus, is what we call the perfect passive participle. The perfect passive participle is actually it's a participle, so it's part adjective, part verb, so it acts like an adjective, so it's going to have endings, adjectival endings, usa, endings. Because Marcus is masculine, it's pulsatus. If this were Julia, we would have pulsata. Or if it were a neuter thing, we'd have pulsatum. And same thing for plural. If we had a plural masculine noun here, we'd have pulsati, a long I here. So the first part of the perfect passive is a perfect passive participle. And then it combines with the forms the present forms of sum. Sum est, sumus est, sunt, to form the full perfect passive verb. So the way we form the perfect passive participle here with pulsatus is simply take the present stem, pulsa, from pulsare, take off the re, and then add a t with the adjective endings usa, in their respective cases. The next feature that I want to point out is in line 13, and that is where we have primum sextus os marci pugno pulsavit, deinde Marcus et Titus sextum pulsaverunt. So pulsaverunt, we see, is a third person, plural, perfect active indicative from pulsara. So if you look this up in the dictionary, you see pulso or pulsare, I punch or to punch. And the endings, again, of the perfect, e isti it, imus istis erunt. So here we have the erunt ending, the third person plural. They punched. Marcus and Titus punched Sextus. So the perfect stem, like ambulo, you see, has a V inserted before the endings. So the present stem, pulsa, becomes pulsawa in the perfect, and then you add your endings. Line 20 has our next new grammar feature. Sor didus est quod humi jacuit, humus enim propter imbram humidus et sordida est. Okay, so he is dirty, he's filthy, because he laid on the ground. Here we have jacuit. Okay, this is another example of a perfect. It has the third person singular ending it. So e isti it, third person singular perfect active indicative. However, notice it does not have the V. That's because this is a second conjugation verb. The second conjugation verbs usually insert a U in front of their ending. So the E becomes a U. So the stem in the present for yakera, to lie down, is yake, I-A-C-E. So yakeo, yakes, yaket, yakemus, yaketes, yakent in the present. Here in the perfect, the E turns to a U, so you end up with yaku as your perfect stem, to which you add e isti it, imus istis erunt. Okay, the next feature I want to point out is in line 35. And here we have Julius, who says, Intelligebam te non cornibus sed pugnis pulsatum esse. I understand that you were not hit by horns, cornibus, but by fists. Or I understood that you were hit, not by horns, but by fists. Cornibus is a new form of the third declension. You have seen the fourth declension with words like manus, hand, but this is the first example of the neuter fourth declension. It's a little more rare than the other forms, and it declines here in the margin. You see that the full declension of cornu, horn, is cornu, cornu, cornus, cornu, cornus. So you get oo for the singular, and the plural cornua, cornua, cornuum, cornibus, cornibus. So ua, ibis, ibis for the plural. The word itself here was hit by horns. Okay, is an ablative of instrument or means. By means of what, or with what instrument? With the horns. The next feature I want to look at is in line 65. And move ahead to 65, where we see aliquis pedibus sordidis in solo mundo ambulavit. So this is Amelia, who says, somebody has walked on with dirty feet on my clean floor. So aliquis is an indefinite pronoun. It doesn't have a definite antecedent, and we translate it as someone, somebody. It tells you, implied that I don't know who it was, someone. And then aliquid, something. So I don't know what though. Aliquid something, aliquid someone, both indefinite pronouns. The next feature is in line 83, so go ahead with me to that line. And we see in ludone quoque bonus puer fuisti. So were you also a good boy in school? Fuisti is the perfect second person singular of sum. So sum esse, if you were looking this up in the dictionary, you would not find fuisti. What you would look up is sum. It's an irregular verb, and so its forms are highly irregular for each. You can't predict this form for the perfect. You have to memorize it. So fui, which means I was or I have been. Fuisti, you have been. Fuit, he, she, it has been. The plural continues to add the endings you've seen. Imus istis erunt. So fuimus, fuistis, fuerunt. For we have been, you all have been, they have been. And then we see that the equivalent of esse, to be, in the perfect, is fuisse, to have been. So present active infinitive is esse, to be. Perfect active infinitive, fuisse, to have been. The next feature that I want to point out is also here in the same section where Marcus says se bonum puerum fuisse et laudatum esse. Marcus says that he was a good boy and was praised. So notice here that we have the infinitive to have been, but we don't translate it as to have been. We don't say Marcus says that he to have been a good boy and was praised. We say that he was a good boy because we're in the accusative and infinitive construction, the indirect speech construction. So we translate our infinitives as if they were indicatives. So the perfect infinitive is going to be translated just like the perfect indicative, so we'll translate this as if it were fuit. So Marcus says that, and then translates say as if it were is. Marcus says that he was a good boy. The next feature is in line 90. And we have Marcus, who says, multa nos docuit, legeret, scriberet, computaret, etc. He taught us many things. Multa. You will frequently see adjectives like multus aum, many, and or much. You will see them used in substantive ways where they stand as nouns. He taught us there's no noun to go with multa, and so the neuter accusative or neuter nominative could stand as a substantive noun, or we call it a substantive adjective, acting as a noun. He taught us much. He taught us many things. We see the same thing with ketera here, to read and to write and to do math, and he taught us other things, ketera. The next feature that I want to point out is in line 97. So here we see that Julius says that Marcum dormi visse, nec vero materit credit. Julius says that Marcus slept, but his mother doesn't believe it. Here, dormi visse, we see another example of a perfect infinitive, similar to fuisse, to have been. Here, dormi visse by itself means to have slept. To have slept. And rather than and compare it to the present, which is dormira, to sleep. So dormira, to sleep, dormi visse, to have slept. But we don't translate it that way here. Why? Because we're in indirect speech again, accusative subject and infinitive verb. So Julius says that Marcus slept. Marcus subject, dormi visse, verb. If you were going to give the person, number, tense, mood, voice of dormi visse, or any infinitive, one characteristic of the infinitive is that it does not have person and number. It doesn't have its own person and number, so you wouldn't give a person and number for dormi visse. What you could give is you could give the mood, which is infinitive, the tense, which is perfect, so perfect infinitive, and the voice, which is active. So infinitives have tense, mood, and voice, like their other verb counterparts, but missing person and number. Okay, if you were going to look this up in the dictionary, you would look up under dormio, dormire, I sleep, or to sleep. It's a fourth conjugation verb, and notice that just like ambulare, you get the V in front as part of its stem, dormiv or dormiv. Okay, the next feature I want to point out is in line 113. That is right here where we say, we have non Marcus et sextus scripsit litteras quae in ea tabella leguntur. Not Marcus, but Sextus wrote the letters which are read on this tablet, or on the tablet. So here we have another perfect, scripsit, third person singular, scripsit, est, it, and it is from the verb scribere, so it's a third conjugation. Remember the four conjugations, arra, era, and ira verbs. It's an ira verb, scribere. Notice that the B has disappeared here. So the present stem of scribere is just S-C-R-I-B, scribe. And to that we add O is it, etc. Scribo, scribit, scribit for the present. The perfect stem for the third conjugation tends to add an S in front of its endings, est, it. And notice that the B, notice in the margin that scribes with the BS changed its pronunciation and spelling over time from scripsit to scripsit. And so these forms, these third conjugation perfect stems, are fairly irregular and often have to be memorized, but it's good to at least know the rule. The general rule is that an S is inserted after the present stem before you get the perfect endings with some spelling changes. So if we were going to conjugate fully scribere in the perfect, we'd have scripsi, scripsisti, scripsit, scripsimus, scripsistis, scripserunt. And the dictionary form would be scribo, scribere, I write to write. Present stem just scribe, and perfect stem scrips. The next feature I want to point out is in line 119, where Marcus says, ipse scripsi profecto mihi crede. Of course I myself wrote it. I wrote it myself. Mihi crede, believe me. So in the margin you see that credere, believe, is one of those verbs that takes a special case. You'd expect the accusative of the person that is being believed. So believe me. You expect may here, or at least I would. But instead you get give me your trust. Give your trust to me. And so the dative here of mihi with crede, the imperative, believe me. The next feature is in line 122. And we see, sed Aemilia, quae litteras a Marco scriptas esse credit, aspica Iuli inquit, etc. So, but Aemilia, who believes that the letters were written by Marcus. Okay, so what are the person, number, tense, mood, and voice of scriptas esse? Okay, notice this is the it's the perfect passive. You should recognize this structure because you see the form of sum here, and you see the perfect passive participle here. But notice that instead of sum est sunt, you get the infinitive here of sum. So what this tells you is that you have an infinitive. This is our perfect passive infinitive. And why do we have perfect passive? Why do we have an infinitive here? Because we're in indirect speech again. Believes the letters, Amelia, who believes the letters were written. Notice that as the participle being part adjective, it agrees with letters. Scriptas litteras, the letters were written by Marcus. And if we're going to compare the perfect active and passive infinitives of the verb, let's take for example, just scribere. Okay, the dictionary form of scribere, scribo, scribere. So the active is scribere, to write. The passive is scribi, to be written, scribi. The perfect active takes the perfect stem, scrips, and adds isse, scripsisse, to have written. And the perfect passive infinitive is scriptum esse, to have been written. Or and remember that the scriptum, the participle, will change based on what the thing is that has been written. Okay, we've got one more feature to point out, and that is in line 124, where we have quid dixit magister, Marque. What did the teacher say, Marcus? This dicere comes from dicere. It's another third conjugation verb, and so it's irregular, has a highly irregular form, but notice that this X really is just the combination of the C and an S sound, so the dix changes to an X before the perfect endings. And if we were going to give the person number tense mood voice of dixit, we'd have third person singular, perfect active indicative. And if we conjugated it, we'd have dixi, dixisti, dixit, diximus, dixistis, dixerunt. Our dictionary form is dico, dicera, I speak and to speak, depending on what dictionary you're looking in. The present stem is just dic, dic, and you add the present endings to that, o, is, it, etc. The perfect stem is dix, dix, which is actually just the C plus the S turned into the letter X. So how do the perfect stems, so now we're learning all these new perfect stems in this chapter, how do they all form? For the first and second conjugations, for the first and fourth conjugations, we tend to add a V after the present stem. So like pulsara, pulsa becomes pulsav, pulsaw, and dormira, dormi, the present stem becomes dormiv or dormiv. The second conjugation, like we see with dixit, not with dixit, like with we saw with yakera, to lie down. Yake, the present stem, adds a U, or it changes the E to a U, so you end up with yaku with the endings. The third conjugation, like we see here, tends to add an S after the present stem, which is, especially if that stem ends in a consonant, it tends to change pretty radically. And so that's how you form your stems for the perfect tenses, of which, just a heads up, there are 3 perfect tenses to learn. And which is one reason why we need this to learn this stem very well. So the last feature I want to point out is how you form the participles, the perfect participles from each one of those conjugations. And that's a little simpler because you just take the present stem and you add and you tend to add the letter T in front of that and then and usa endings after that. So dico, dicera, the stem is dic, D-I-C. If you add a T to DIC, you end up with dict, and then add usa to that, dictum, dictusa that is your perfect passive participle. So if you take the verb pulsare, add a T to the stem pulsa, and you end up with pulsat, and add usa and you get pulsatusa That's the perfect passive participle. Remember that participle can act just like an adjective. So the boy who was hit, the hit boy, could be puer pulsatus, and then if you add sum est to that, you get it's the perfect passive verb. So puer pulsatus est, the boy was hit. Okay, so those are all the new grammar and syntax features for chapter 21.